Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. Now, speaking of government, I want to ask you a question about our president, Joe Biden. A lot of people have a lot of comments back and forth, but Peter, you're one of the greatest economic minds, in my opinion, that we have right now. What would you say, if you had to give Mr. Biden a grade in terms of how he's doing economically as president? What would your assessment be?
Well, I mean, you get an F minus, I guess, or unless I can come up with a lower grade, then maybe an F minus minus or something like that. I mean, but it's not like I gave Trump, a good grade either. I mean, the bigger difference between Trump and Biden seems to be on foreign policy. I mean, because Biden's getting an F there as well. So, I'm not sure the grade I would have given Trump, but Trump wasn't that bad on foreign policy. And that's not really where my expertise is, but you don't have to be an expert to recognize that Biden's foreign policy is a complete disaster. But the problem with Trump on the economy was that he was a big spender. He made government bigger. He cut taxes a little bit, but to me, taxes is not the real, burden of government. The burden of government is spending. Taxes is simply one way that we pay for that spending. But if we don't pay for it one way, we're going to pay for it another way. So the important thing, if you want to relieve the American public of some of the burden of paying for government, the way you do that is you make government smaller. You cut government spending. That is the only real way to lighten that load. But unfortunately, Trump made government bigger and more expensive. He increased spending on the military. He increased spending on welfare and various domestic programs, all the while continuing to allow all the entitlements to grow unchecked on autopilot. So Trump made the economy, the government bigger, and so he weakened the economy. The trade deficits got larger under Trump. I mean, Trump campaigned to make the trade deficit smaller, and instead they've hit record highs. So the budget deficit hit a record under Trump, trade deficit hit a record under Trump, government spending hit a record under Trump. Of course, all those records have since been broken under Biden. So he's continuing Trumponomics, only worse, because even bigger increases in government spending, even larger deficits. And so it's, the problems are, continuing and getting worse.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, right? And even for me as a real estate guy, I'm hearing a lot of the Biden administration proposal to give credits here and give money there, especially when it comes to the housing market. And obviously affordable housing is quite the issue. Now I want to get your take on this, Peter. Now when it comes to the housing market, obviously that's an area you've spoken on in the past. A lot of people have been going back and forth, especially on YouTube, about their similarities with now in 2008. And well, no, there are differences, and it's a completely different story. In looking at current housing market status, what similarities, differences do you see now versus 2008?
Well, I would say that the degree of speculation in the housing market was higher then, as far as people owning multiple homes, zero down, no doc loans, liar loans, teaser rates on an arm. I mean, it was crazy back then, but that was the result of the Fed's policy at the time, but also Wall Street was securitizing a lot of these subprime mortgages that Fannie and Freddie was buying up aggressively. And you had all these cash out refis, but a lot of this, of course, all of it rather, was a result of the Fed and the moral hazard of Fannie and Freddie and government guaranteed mortgages, government insured bank accounts. I mean, this was all fueling that. I mean, that's happening today, but to a lesser degree. But you also have artificially low interest rates, and you have government subsidized mortgages. And so people are still overpaying for homes using money they don't have, taking out loans that they probably can't repay in real terms. And so housing prices are being inflated by Fed policy. And so that's helping to make homes less affordable. And of course, all the inflation that the Fed is creating is causing construction costs to go up dramatically. So it's very, very expensive to build new homes. So a lot of the housing demand that is coming from all this money printing, that people are having to bid for the existing houses because it's too expensive to build new ones because of the material costs, because of the labor costs. And so you're bidding up the price of existing homes. But of course, if you own a home, the cost of maintaining that home is also going way up. You know, your utilities are going up, your insurance is going up, your maintenance costs are going up, your property taxes are going up. So everything associated with home ownership is going up. But I think one of the big problems that we're seeing now, because this maybe is something that would hit home for you, has to do with the real, villainization of the landlords. And, this new idea that whenever there's a problem in the economy, tenants don't have to pay their rent. And this rent moratorium, I mean, clearly it's unconstitutional, but that doesn't seem to stop the government from doing stuff. And of course, it's unconstitutional on a federal level, but there may not be anything that stops the states from imposing these type of rental moratoriums, depending on their own constitutions. But a lot of people have really taken advantage of these moratoriums because a lot of people that were unemployed during the pandemic were actually getting more money from the government than they were earning when they had jobs. So they actually had more money to pay their rent. Yet they didn't pay their rent either. Even though they had more money, they didn't pay their rent because the government said, hey, your landlord can't kick you out if you stop paying your rent. And then people were like, well, I'm just going to stop paying my rent because if he can't kick me out, then I'll just live here rent free. And there have been people doing this for over a year now. And eventually, the landlords are going to be able to kick them out, which means they're either going to get kicked out or they're going to have big increases in their rents. But I also think this really makes the whole business of landlord, it makes it a lot riskier because your cash flows from your leases are a lot less dependable if at any moment the government could just decide that your tenants don't have to pay you. And so that extra risk means that the rents have to be a lot higher to make up for that risk. And I also think it means that fewer people will want to own rental properties that rent to the type of people, the class of people that are likely to take advantage of those types of moratoriums. And those tend to be lower income people, because if you're upper income or you have some kind of means, if you stop paying your rent for 6 months or a year, your landlord can still sue you and go after your assets to cover the back rent. But if you don't have any other assets, if you're just in debt, you have credit card debt or student loans, you have a negative net worth, you don't own anything, you can't get blood from a stone. So the landlord can't do anything against the tenant that doesn't have any assets. Now, that tenant may have a job and he may have income, but even getting to attach a paycheck is pretty difficult. And then, of course, the guy just says, well, I'm hardship or I'm bankrupt, and you can't do that. So I just think a lot fewer landlords are going to want to get into this business. And so the supply of homes available to low or moderate income is going to really shrink, which means the rents are going to skyrocket. And then once again, what's the government going to say? Oh my God, there's no affordable housing. Oh, see, the free market doesn't provide affordable housing. Well, it would have provided it if the government didn't screw the whole thing up. And it's not just this, it's rent control and all sorts of other things the government does to interfere with the free market so that this need is not actually met. And now the government says, well, the government's going to meet the need, but then the low-income housing costs a fortune because the government provides it. And when the government provides it, it costs a lot more than it costs when the free market provides it.